The Gladiators had a great season 5. I mean, they won 2 tournaments. And even though they had a bit of a lackluster back half, I would still consider it a successful year and a tough one to follow up on, both through their results and their roster. A lot of the core of the team actually left this offseason, with Shu, Skewed, and Reiner's contracts being expired, and the Glads choosing not to extend Space and Happy. This leaves only Kevster and Funny Astro retained from last year. However, they do get to keep their coaching staff of Face, Smash, and Unter, which I think will be a big boon going into this season. Even with the guard crumbling around them, they get a pretty decent roster right now. You get to round out your DPS line with Yaki and Kai, you get Dante as your lone tank, and you get Lastro and Babel for your support line. This roster isn't bad, but it's definitely missing a shoe-sized, star-powered hole right there. The support line is still quite good, however. Funny Astro was just a top 3 Lucio minimum last season, and I think his Brig is supposed to be quite good as well, but he hasn't had much of an opportunity to show it since his Fusion days, because he's been beside Skewed, and I mean, you're not going to play Funny Astro on Brig when you can just put in Skewed, right? And I definitely wouldn't trust him on Flex support, but you don't need to. You have Babel and Lastro, so you should be all good there. The Lastro signing felt a bit weird to me when it happened, and honestly, it still does now. I expected his career moving forward to kind of be like Violet's, where he would be the Lucio super flex god, right? But once you sign him beside Funny Astro, that's just off the table. He's never benching Funny Astro on Lucio, so assessing him as a more traditional flex support, I'm just way less impressed with him. I know he gets a lot of praise from within the league. I mean, Dante and Jake were raving about him on the Plat Chat podcast, right? But whenever I actually look at it across multiple teams now, I just don't think he's in that elite category. I think he'll perform fine. I think he'll be better than average. It's a very good category. But if you're trying to mimic what happened with Shu last season, I don't think the structure will be able to be replicated with Lastro in that category. Babel was at minimum a top 2 flex support in Contender's career last season, and I like his game a lot. He has great mechanics and he's a very smart player. Of course, he does benefit from being on the dominant O2 Blast, but I think his talent is the real deal. I'm not sure who's going to get the start for flex support on this team. I want to say Babel at least on Kiriko, because despite Lastro making it deep into the playoffs, he was on Lucio, so Babel actually has more experience on it in the high stakes play. But these players are very close in skill, and it could go either way. The only thing I'll say for sure is that I would expect Lastro to be playing the Brig flex role if they play double flex comps, but that's the only thing I'm certain of. The DPS line is interesting because it's debatable if it's an upgrade, a downgrade, or a side grade to last year. Kai to me is actually a downgrade to how they ended last year with Happy, but I think he's an upgrade to how they started with Ons and Potafon. He's extremely mechanically gifted, especially on hard hit scan, but last year he kind of lost his way with how the Sojourn meta developed, and he suffered a lot for it along with Atlanta as a whole. I think that issue, though, can be corrected with good coaching, and I trust the Glad staff way more than the Atlanta staff. I'm expecting a bounce-back season from Kai, even if Sojourn remains meta, just because I trust that the staff can influence his playstyle to align more with the current meta. Yaki is a great complement to Kev. You have 2 of the most hyped Tracers in the league on the same team, but on top of that, this gives you a deadly Tracer Genji, probably with Yaki on Genji, I would guess. This is the final straw for Yaki. There are no more excuses. The community is already largely split down the middle between the Avast, Soldier Strong, top 5 DPS Yaki versus just like, no, he's not him anymore. Get over it, right? And he performed very, very well for how absolutely piss poor New York were last year. But I need him to compete now. I need this team to be upper mid at least. Yaki needs to be pulling his weight, even if he's not in 100% of the time. That's fine. He doesn't have to be. You're competing with Kevster for your spot. That's not easy. But I need a real solid performance. This is it. He needs to own it. There are no more excuses for Yaki not being on a upper mid team, a very good team, at the very least. Kevster is still going to be Kevster though, and now with Shugon, there is no doubt who the star player is on this team. I'm not sure how much Kevster's gameplay will suffer, if at all, from not having Shu's plays to capitalize on, but it's going to be pretty clear here what was really going on for the Gladiators' success last season. The most likely situation is that they were both contributing a lot, and it also depends on how much the backline steps up and fills the void there, but I still think there's some truth to the statement of, well, who was really the main big star last season? But I guess we'll find out one way or another. In my opinion, Dante was the best Western solo tank option that you could pick up in this offseason. And even though all of his tanks aren't elite, his baseline for most of them is relatively high, and worst case scenario, you can fall back on his Doomfist. How far the Doomfist can take your team will vary from meta to meta, and it's a very valid concern. But I also think if they invest time into his other tanks, you could get a Reiner situation where you have the Infinity Gauntlet of different tanks that you can swap around between, like in the mid-season madness. And honestly, even comparing him to the Reiner Space tank line last season, I don't think it's a direct downgrade even right now, ignoring development possibilities. Overall, I'm expecting the team to be a bit worse comparatively to last season, especially with how hard the teams around them have leveled up, and they'll probably be on the outside of the top 5 looking in. The problem for me isn't a potential hero pool thing or anything, it's just the raw talent compared to some of the other teams, especially in the support role, feels a little bit lackluster. I'm looking at the high end of the level below the best team, so like, I guess upper mid is what you'd call it. Also, their in-game skins are just way worse now. They went from one of the best to just like, I don't even want it. Like, what? Bruh. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below as always, and let me know what teams you want me to do next. Thank you so much. Have yourself a good one. Deuces.